The President of the United States, Joe Biden, will remove Cuba from the list of countries sponsoring terrorism, White House officials reported this Tuesday. According to U.S. media, the measure would be part of an agreement by which the government led by Miguel Díaz-Canel was expected to release protesters imprisoned during the wave of protests in July 2021. Minutes after this news became known, the Cuban Foreign Ministry, or MINREX, announced the release of 553 inmates imprisoned for various crimes on the island, without specifying details about their identities or the date on which they will be released from prison. Although the organization claimed that it is a common practice as part of the close and fluid relations with the Vatican State, many link it to the White House announcement. Barack Obama's administration had already removed the Caribbean country from the list of sponsors of terrorism in 2015, but a few days before the end of his first presidency, Donald Trump included it again. The Biden government justified the decision announced this Tuesday by saying that Cuba has not provided any support for international terrorism in the previous 6 months, and has given guarantees that it will not support acts of international terrorism in the future, according to an official statement. For his part, the president of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, considered that the decision goes in the right direction, although it will have a limited scope. When Trump included the island on the blacklist prepared by the State Department in 2021, he justified it in the refusal of the Cuban government to extradite members of the National Liberation Army, or ELN, of Colombia, its alliance with the government of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, and his alleged asylum for American fugitives. Cuba was also included on the list of countries sponsoring terrorism from 1982 to 2015, for allegedly hosting members of gangs considered terrorists such as ETA in Spain, or the Colombian FARC. After Cuba's withdrawal, only 3 countries remain on the list of sponsors of terrorism: North Korea, Iran, and Syria. In addition to the island's removal from the list of sponsors of terrorism, according to U.S. media, Washington committed in the agreement to take 2 unilateral measures to help the Cuban people that reverse decisions adopted during the first Trump administration. The first is to rescind a memorandum enacted in 2017 that identifies a list of companies and sub-entities controlled by Cuban military, intelligence or security forces with which persons subject to U.S. jurisdiction are prohibited from engaging in direct financial transactions. Second, the White House will suspend Title III of the Helms-Burton Act, which allows Americans to file lawsuits in court for property expropriated by the Cuban government since the 1959 revolution. The U.S. administrations had kept this title of the law suspended since its enactment in 1966 to avoid diplomatic conflicts with allied countries whose companies operate in Cuba, but Trump decided to reactivate it in 2019. With this, companies from countries such as Spain, Canada, and France, which operate in the tourism sector and other areas in Cuba, were exposed to litigation in U.S. courts. An unexpected and fragile measure. Biden's decision has taken many by surprise, since his government not only did not soften the measures against Cuba adopted by Trump, but also imposed new sanctions on officials of the Díaz-Canel regime after the episodes of repression that followed the anti-government demonstrations on July 11 and 12, 2021. In recent weeks, the Cuban government has intensified its campaign for Washington to remove the country from the blacklist, something that has also been requested by some governments in the region, such as those of Colombia and Mexico, and human rights groups and activists, by considering that its effects harm ordinary citizens. Washington prohibits countries it considers sponsors of terrorism from exporting or selling weapons, certain exports that would also improve their military capabilities, and restricts economic assistance.